Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel, Taylor Talks Tales. Today I have a slightly different video than I normally make. I am making a movie recommendations video instead of a book recommendations video or book review, anything like that. It's going to be all about movies today. So if you're one of my subscribers or viewers who's more interested in book-related content, don't worry, I have some videos that are coming out this weekend and into next week, so stay tuned for those. But if you're some of my subscribers or viewers who are like me and you like both books and movies, keep watching because I have some super fun winter horror recommendations. For me, it's been kind of chilly and cold the last couple of days and very blustery, and especially today, for whatever reason, I've just been in this like winter mindset. Like, winter's definitely not over, and we could be getting some more snow here in Washington next week after, depending on which weather channel and website that you check out. So I figured I wanted to do my recommendations video now. So let's get into it. So this first video I want to recommend to you is not only one of my favorite winter horror movies, it's also one of my favorite horror movies, and it's also one of my favorite just movies in general. I adore this film. I think it's so well done and powerful and ahead of its time, just fantastic, and special effects were amazing. Just everything was practically perfect about this film, in my opinion anyway. And that is John Carpenter's The Thing. So this came out in 1982, and I do think it was ahead of its time because I don't think it was appreciated, but as the years have gone by, more people have watched it and realized this was a really good, solid movie. And this movie, if you haven't seen it before, pretty much it follows some Antarctic researchers and scientists who are at a station down in Antarctica, and we follow the United States crew, but we also, something's happened with Norwegian group. The movie basically opens up, there's a dog that's getting chased by a helicopter shooting at the dog, the helicopter ends up crashing, and then the US scientists take in the dog and figure we gotta find out what happened to the Norwegians, so they go explore, and then things start to happen, and it becomes very apparent very quickly that there is something that can just take on the form of a living being and completely change itself to match them. And then all of a sudden it just is, wait a minute, who's real, who's not, who's the monster, who isn't, and it just, the way it escalates is so, just the pacing of this movie is practically perfect. The atmosphere, I think one of the strengths of this movie is the atmosphere. I think that you could not have had this movie set anywhere else, but an isolated place like this, and the snow and the cold and the blizzardy weather, and just being far from humanity and just everything like that just really adds to the film. I think it just, so that's why whenever it's winter time, I usually like to at least watch this a couple of times, and then sometimes I may actually watch winter movies in the summer, which I know sounds weird, but if you're super hot and just trying to cool off, it's actually pretty fun to watch a movie like this, eat a bunch of ice cream, and soak your feet in like a kiddie pool. So anyway, this is my first recommendation. Of all these on the list, this is my favorite one, but I like all of them and I recommend all of them, but check this one out. Alright, next one. This one is, so the book of this movie was on my winter horror book recommendations, and I also want to recommend the movie as well, because I kind of think you need to check out both sources of, the book and the movie, and that's The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, and of course based off of the story by Stephen King. Now, I enjoy this movie a lot. I know Stephen King hates it, and I get why, because it really does change a lot of things from the book. But for me, I can kind of appreciate the book and the movie as like almost separate entities, because they are very different. The themes are different, the way the characters are portrayed are different, there's just so many changes to them. So as an adaptation, I don't recommend this, but just as the movie, it is well done. Stanley Kubrick was a very strong director and movie maker, so I do think you should check this out. If you aren't familiar with the story, it pretty much follows a family of three. They end up going to the Overlook Hotel where the dad, Jack Torrance, he's a writer, but he also is the caretaker for this place. And after a little bit of time, they end up getting snowed in, as was pretty much expected because they're in the middle of the mountains and this hotel is only open in spring, summer, and early fall. So once the snow hits, it becomes very isolating and things start to happen and Jack starts to kind of lose his sense of reality, and all of a sudden it's like, are there ghosts, is it not, and it just goes from there. And winter does play a very strong role in this because they're trapped and it's snowy outside, and at some points they end up out in the elements. So this is a very good winter movie. I think you can watch it anytime, but definitely has that winter vibe to it. Next movie is, it's not the best movie on this list, but I have some nostalgic memories attached to this movie because I watched it in college and there's a lot about this movie that I kind of experienced. It's Wind Chill, and it has Emily Blunt in it. This was a long time ago. This movie came out in like the I think it came out in like maybe 2007, 2008. But I actually watched this movie right before I left, because I went to Washington State University, which is on the opposite side of the state, and to get from Pullman to Seattle, you have to drive through Snoqualmie Pass. And it was wintertime, and I got a rideshare, and my rideshare and I were going through this like really blustery part of the state, and then we had to go through the pass, and that was interesting. And so pretty much like watching this movie right before doing that just added to the creep factor for me, because this movie essentially follows Emily Blunt's character. She's a college student. She ends up getting a ride from this guy who ends up being kind of a creeper, and they end up crashing, and they're just abandoned to the elements. Essentially, they're stuck. Nobody's coming for them. They can't get help, and all of a sudden it seems like there may be ghosts or creatures or something out there in the winter with them. So not only are they battling the winter elements, they're also battling whatever else might be out there. So this is fun. It's not the best movie per se, but it's very fun and extremely winter themed. So I definitely recommend checking it out at least once or twice. Next movie, this one I really enjoy a lot. I believe it's an indie film, and I feel like not a lot of people talk about this movie, but I think more people should, because I think it's an incredibly smart film. And that is Pontypool. So this movie, it's a Canadian film, and it pretty much follows this small town that is almost having some sort of epidemic. There's some kind of thing that is turning people almost into zombies, but not necessarily your traditional zombies where they're like brains, or, you know, like Dawn of the Dead zombies where they just want to eat flesh and stuff. It's a little bit more complicated than that. And it's pretty much following the main character. He's like a radio DJ, and he's kind of narrating what's going on in his radio studio, and he's pretty well protected where he is, and he's just kind of talking about things, and it gets a little bit more complicated than that, especially what is causing people to go berserk. Is really it's just super smart and creative, and I really enjoyed it a lot. And the reason why I think it's a winter movie is it takes place, it's winter and there's a blizzard going on, so everybody's cut off from everywhere else. It's a very small town, and the winter elements do play a role in a lot of the events. So definitely recommend checking this out if you're looking for a horror movie with a little bit more substance, and that makes you think a little bit, and that's is not just your typical run-of-the-mill type of movie. Alright, next one is, this was also based off of a book, and the book was also on my book recommendations video for my winter horror book video, and that's Misery. So unlike with The Shining, I do feel like the movie version of Misery and the book versions, they are pretty similar. There's definitely some changes and stuff, but it's not as drastic of a difference. But it's really fun to see Misery brought to life. Kathy Bates does a phenomenal job in this movie. She deserved, I believe she won the Oscar for this film, and she totally deserved it. She brought Annie Wilkes to life. And, you know, pretty much, if you're not familiar with the story, Ryder gets into a car crash and he gets rescued by his #1 fan, who is bonkers, and things escalate from there. But this is just very fun, and it takes place during the winter. Paul Sheldon, the writer, crashes his car because of the snowstorm and blizzard that's going on, and they're definitely, winter does play a pretty strong role in this, so I consider this a sort of a winter horror movie. Next one is solidly a winter horror movie, and that's 30 Days of Night. This is based off of the graphic novel, which I enjoy the graphic novel quite a bit, and in fact, I don't know if I mentioned it on my video, my winter horror book video or not. I don't think I did, but I should have, because I really enjoyed that a lot and I love this story. 30 Days of Night, I think, is really underrated and underappreciated. Not a lot of people seem to really talk about this anymore, but I think it's so much fun. So this movie, pretty much the premise is that there's a small town in Alaska that gets invaded by vampires. And it's 30 Days of Night because it's in, I believe it's Barrow, Alaska, and they go through a period of time where the sun does not come up. So the vampires have free reign on this entire town. And the thing with these vampires is they aren't sparkly like in Twilight, and they aren't hot, beautiful men like in Interview with a Vampire or anything like that. These are like legit monsters. They're just bloody and they're gross and they're just they are truly monstrous. And it's a survival story because not only are these characters the few remaining people who don't get attacked and eaten by these vampires, they're not only battling vampires, but they're also battling the elements and, anything like that. Like if your town was all of a sudden ransacked and just destroyed and you're in the middle of nowhere, completely isolated, and it's snowy and cold and, in the negative degrees and that kind of stuff. So it plays a role in it. And I think that, more people should really give this a shot. I know that there's a lot of people out there who kind of think, oh, this is probably just going to be a crappy movie, but I actually think it's a pretty fun, solid movie, and a really good vampire movie too. Alright, this next one, I'm only going to briefly talk about it because it's technically not a horror film, but I wanted to put it on this list just because I think it's a wonderful movie and it has horror elements to it, and it seems like a lot of horror fans enjoy this movie too, I think because it's brutal at times. And that's The Revenant. It had Leonardo DiCaprio in it. This movie has some of the best cinematography of like winter landscapes and North American landscapes I've ever seen in a movie. I just think it's visually stunning, and it's a survival story. You have this main character who ends up getting left for dead after a bear attack, and he wants to seek revenge, and he manages to come back and survive and is tracking this other guy down, and it's just great. It's well done, and it is definitely pretty dark, and the revenge is awesome, and the bear mauling scene, that's actually one of the reasons why I decided to put this movie on this list, not just because it's wintry, but also I think it is more brutal than the average viewer would like. I think horror fans were fine with it, but I do know it bothered a lot of my friends who aren't horror fans and wanted to just see this movie because it had Leonardo DiCaprio in it. But anyway, this is a good movie and I definitely think you should check it out. Alright, next one. This one is a very fun movie, and that's The Children. So this movie, it's like a more serious version of Cooties. I don't know if you've seen the movie Cooties, but that's basically where zombie children take over an elementary school, and that's more of a horror comedy. This is more focused on the horror, where there are these kids, they contract some kind of parasite, and they start killing their parents and just anybody they can. And it takes place during the winter, and they're outside for a lot of it, so I wanted to include it on this list because there definitely is sort of that element of, there's a bunch of families that come together and they're kind of far away from a bunch of other houses, because I believe this is an English film, so they're like an English manor house, and there's, a lot of isolating things that happen, and they're stuck trying to fight their kids, and the kids are brutal and creepy, and it's a lot of fun. So I enjoy movies that, take what are normally innocent things and make them monstrous. So this is just fun. Alright, next one is Frozen, and not that Frozen. It is this Frozen. So this Frozen, I think Adam Green is the director. What his name is? Sean Green, I think. Adam Green. I was right. Anyway, this movie, there's a lot of mixed opinions about this movie. There are some people who think it's really dumb and hate it, and there are other people who think it's wonderful and fantastic. I really enjoy it. I don't know if I would say this is like the best ever, you know, I'm not in the camp of like this is, I love it, but I really did enjoy it a lot. It combines the survival elements that I really enjoy, and it is pretty smart at times, and it just really focuses, I mean, there's no like big bad in this per se. It's mainly just 3 college students who went on a ski trip. They decide to do one last run on their ski, going down on the, you know, the hill. It's been a long time since I've skied, so I don't exactly remember all the terminology for it, but basically they're going to do one last hurrah, and they end up, basically there are some unfortunate events that led to them getting stranded on a ski lift. So they're stuck up there, and it's, you know, negative degrees, it's super cold, and it's the weekend, so they have to wait, and they're like, well, we can't wait days being stuck up here. So it's all about them trying to get down. And what complicates things are there are a bunch of wolves that are lurking in the forest. So there's that complicating factor as well, besides just being stranded like 50, 60 feet up in the air when it's freezing. So this is fun. Definitely check it out. All right, next one. I have this one and then one more, and then we're done. This one is Ravenous. This one, I really enjoy this because it combines sort of a winter North American atmosphere with Native American lore and kind of it's sort of, I would say maybe like a Western horror as well, and it follows the myth of the Wendigo and cannibalism and all of that. And I feel like this is sort of a underrated little horror gem. Pretty much it's following this main guy and some other characters who are trying to settle the West, and there's war breaking out and just a lot going on, but cannibalism is featured in this, and it's, in a way, I feel like there are a couple funny moments in this, like a dark comedy, if that makes sense. And there's also, of course, sort of some revenge elements to it as well, which I really enjoyed, so definitely go check this out. And the last, but not least, is I saved a really fun one for the end, and that's Dead Snow. So this movie, essentially you follow these some characters who end up, I think they go to like a ski lodge or something. Yeah, they're going skiing. They just want to have fun and have sex and drink and all that. But unbeknownst to these guys, there are Nazi zombies that are in the forest, and they rise up and they have to find themselves battling these Nazi zombies in the snow for their lives. And this one's just really fun. Like, it's just a super fun, funny movie, and I could just watch this all the time. It's just, it doesn't really take itself seriously in a good way. You know, it knows what type of movie it is, and the gore is very solid in this. Despite that, like, the gore is great. There's some really awesome kill scenes in it, and yeah, and winter plays a huge role in it because it's a ski vacation and they're kind of isolated up there and it's snowy and all that. So definitely check this one out. It is a foreign film. I recommend watching the subtitles. I don't really like dubbed movies, especially if the mouths really do not match up, but you do you. But I recommend watching the sub version of this, but it's fun. So those are my recommendations. There's some other winter horror movies out there. These are just, I think, some of my favorites that I really enjoy. So if you have any winter recommendations for horror films that I didn't list on here, let me know. I'll go check them out. If you've seen any of these movies, let me know what you thought of them. And please comment, rate, and subscribe. And I will talk to you guys later. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Bye.